My name is Rabbi Philip Heilbrun. I'm speaking as president and a patron of the Rabbinical Council of Victoria, and I thank you for your attendance. Together with the Sachs family, our speakers tonight, the Australian Jewish community, Jewish communities worldwide, and a multitude of other faiths who hold Harav Yaakov Tzvi ben Aryeh Zatzal in the highest admiration and esteem, we are all consumed with a deep sense of sorrow and a loss at his passing. Wise leader of our people, brilliant scholar, inspirational orator par excellence, blessed with a sensitive, caring heart, beating in time with people of every kind, Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs was abundantly endowed with outstanding talents, and above all, the love of Hashem, the Jewish people, and all God's children. Furthermore, he was imbued with a sincere passion to muster all his superlative qualities in order to be of service and accessible to everyone. His eminent success in this regard resonates with the description of the biblical Avraham in this week's Torah reading. Nasi Elokim ata betochenu. You are a prince of God in our midst. How blessed are we to have had a scholar, teacher, and friend of his caliber in our midst. One well and regularly connected with Australian Jewry, who taught us Torah, Jewish thought and philosophy, who nurtured our prayers through his Sidurim and Machzorim, translations and commentaries, who by example led us to heighten our Ahavat Hashem, our love of God, Ahavat Yisrael, the love of the Jewish people, and Ahavat HaBriot, indeed the love of all God's creatures and all mankind. Sadly, the warmth of Rabbi Sachs's presence among us has been eclipsed, and we, who were so spiritually buoyed, uplifted by the vitality of his inspirational activities and his brilliant insights, are left profoundly dismayed. Yet Harav Yonatan Zatzal, throughout his life, prepared even for this unhappy eventuality, and has bequeathed to the world in perpetuity a vast body of teachings, prolific writings, speeches, lectures, and excellent moving insights, a remarkable source of inspiration for this and future generations, sincerely searching for a meaningful Jewish way of life. Indeed, he was Nasi Elokim, a most noble person, and we thank Hashem that we were blessed to learn from him. Amen. I now invite Rabbi Mordechai Gutnick of the Melbourne Beth Din and a patron of the Rabbinical Council of Victoria, and Rabbi Yehoram Ullman of the Sydney Beth Din to recite Tehillim Chaf Gimel 23 and Kaf Chaf Aleph 121.
Chapter Chaf Gimel. Yismele David, Adonai Roi Lo Echso, B'nei Steshe Yarbitzeni Al Mei Menuchis Yinahaleni, Nafshi Yeshevei V'yancheni V'maglei Tzedek L'ma'an Shemoi, Gam Ki Elech B'geit Tzalmoves Lo Iroro Ki Ato Imodi, Shivtecho Umishantecho Heim O Yenachamuni, Tarich L'fonai Shulchan Neged Tzoreroi, Dishanto Vashem En Reishi Koisirvoyo, Ach, toiv chesed yildufuni kol yemei chayoi, v'shavti b'veis Adonai le'orech yomim.
Yitein lamoy traglecho al yonum shemrecho hin elyon v'leyishon shoymer Yisroel Adonai shemrecho Adonai tzilcho al yad yimenecho yoim b'mashemesh lo yakeko v'yoreach baloilo Adonai yishmorcho mikol ro yishmeris nafshecho Adonai yishmotzeischo v'yecho miyato v'yad oilom.
Thank you, Rabbi Gutnick and Rabbi Ullman, for your heartfelt prayers. My name is Yaakov Glassman. I'm the president of the Rabbinical Association of Australasia, and it is my honor to introduce our next speaker, Chief Rabbi of the United Hebrew Congregations of the Commonwealth, Rabbi Ephraim Mervis. Rabbi Mervis will have been one of the privileged few in this world who will have gained personal insight into the demanding role of the Chief Rabbi of the UK. And as Rabbi Sachs's successor, Rabbi Mervis is well placed to provide us a window into Rabbi Sachs's world to which we might otherwise not be privy. On a personal note, I've had the opportunity to meet with Chief Rabbi Mervis on several occasions and feel privileged that he occupied the pulpit of my shul, the St. Kilda Hebrew congregation, exactly 6 years ago. And even more privileged that whilst in Melbourne, he and his Rebbetzin Valerie joined my Rebbetzin Sarah and I at our home for Shabbat lunch on that same day. Chief Rabbi Mervis is a wonderful ambassador for the Jewish community, and we are honored he could join us here live tonight for this event. Thank you, Rabbi Mervis, for joining us, and we look forward to your words honoring the great legacy of Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, Zecher Tzadik Livracha.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Glassman, for your gracious words of welcome. Distinguished rabbis, community leaders, Lord Kestenbaum, ladies and gentlemen. Ever since Saturday night, something extraordinary has taken place in our world. The depth of pain, the sense of loss, the grief that is being expressed by tens of thousands of people globally and well beyond the confines of Jewish communities is something absolutely remarkable, but not unexpected. And that is because we are mourning a Prince of God in our midst. Nesi Elokim ata betochenu. Rabbi Halbrin quoted for us this verse from Parshat Chayei Sarah, which we will read on Shabbat. And notice that these original words were stated by the Canaanites, the children of Chet, with regard to Abraham, our patriarch. It wasn't just the members of his household and of his faith who declared, "You're a Prince of God in our midst." The whole world appreciated that fact. Such was, with Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs as well, the impact that he has had on our entire world. A leader can be assessed according to who his followers are. Rabbi Sachs has many, many followers, true followers, passionate followers, and will continue to have followers for many, many years to come. I have been a follower of Rabbi Sachs, and perhaps in addition to being a follower in a regular form, also in a unique way. And that is because on two separate occasions, I followed him through being his successor. The first was when I became the rabbi of the Marble Arch Synagogue after he became chief rabbi in 1991, and I moved over from Ireland to take his pulpit at the Marble Arch Shul. And there was something that I noticed there in that community in the aftermath of his spiritual leadership. You see, when it comes to great leadership, you can use many impressive adjectives: empathic, compassionate, kind, impactful, reliable. But for me, the most impressive adjective of them all must be inspirational. Because when I inform somebody about something, well, that person just registers. But when I inspire, that provides a life-shaping opportunity for others. And that's exactly what I noticed Rabbi Sachs had achieved within the Marble Arch community. And when I succeeded him a second time, I noticed that he had taken the same capacity to inspire to a national and then to a global level as well. And that is why right now there is such depth of pain and such an enormous sense of loss. For all of us, it was a treat to sit at his feet, to hear him speak, to benefit from his extraordinary oratory. He had that capacity to utilize a turn of phrase, to be a master wordsmith of the English language. Let me share with you just one single example amongst many of his brilliance. He would speak about the fact that in biblical Hebrew, there is no word for history. Yes, we use terms such as Yomot Olam, Divrei Hayamim, but there's nothing which quite has the connotation of history, and that's why in modern Hebrew, how do you say history? It's historia. And he explained why. History is his story. It's an account by another person about events that happened to other people. It doesn't relate to me personally. We have a different term in our tradition. It is zachor, remembering. So when I reflect back on past events for our nation, I find my own place within it. My neshama was there, and as a result, I relate to it personally. I've internalized what has transpired, and therefore it becomes part of my present, and it informs and inspires my future. And that is why, as a people, Rabbi Sachs always taught, we have an obsession with the past. It's for the sake of our present and our future. Alas, as of last Shabbat, Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs will be part of history. But in addition to that, he'll be part of our collective Zachor. We who have had the privilege to be so impressed and inspired by him, we will carry those memories with us, and they will continue to inform and inspire our future. So much is being said about the legacy of Rabbi Sachs. And sometimes legacy is hidden. You can't actually put your finger on it. But allow me, please, to identify what I consider to be the essence of his legacy. The Rambam Maimonides quotes for us the imperative of the Torah, which we all know by heart, V'ahavta et Hashem Elokecha, you must love the Lord your God. And the Rambam asks, how can there be a mitzvah to love? I don't have a love button. You can't automatically just press something and produce love. Love has to be genuine. It has to be there. And in the absence of it, nobody can force me to have it. So the Rambam explained as follows: V'ahavta, love the Lord your God, means ahavehu ala briot. It's in the hifil, the causative, cause God to be loved by people. That's how we love God, by causing him to be loved by others. That's the legacy of Rabbi Lord Sachs. He has caused God to be loved by the world. He has proven the relevance of our ancient faith within modern sophisticated times. He has shown that religion has its rightful place within the public square of the 21st century. He has caused God to be loved. And in addition to that, those of us who've always been close to him have noticed an aspect of his life which perhaps has been hidden from people living on the other side of the world, who've only been exposed to his oratory and to his writings. And this is family. He would always teach us as his rabbis during his 22 years as chief rabbi, that in addition to being community leaders, we must always primarily and foremostly see ourselves as being family members. His Hebrew name was not Jonathan, it was Yaakov. And in the Bible, Yaakov has two names, Yaakov and Israel, Jacob and Israel. Primarily, he's called Yaakov when there's a description of him as a family man. He's called Yisrael as the patriarch, the leader of the nation. And that's why we are not the Bnei Yaakov, we are the Bnei Yisrael. And Rabbi Sachs lived up to this aspiration. In addition to being that remarkable inspirational leader, he was also an outstanding family man. And we should all take a leaf out of his book, to engage with the world, but to never forget that family comes first. This Shabbat, we will be reading Parshat Chayei Sarah. It's all about the life of Sarah, but when you have a look at the content of the Parsha, it's about the death of Sarah, yet it is called Chayei Sarah. And that's because even though Sarah physically passed away, in spirit, she remains alive to this day. And so too with regard to the great man whom we're remembering at this time. As of Shabbos, physically, he has passed on, but spiritually, he will always be a part of our heart and our minds, and will live on to inspire us for all time to come. Yehi Zichro Baruch. May his memory be for an eternal blessing. Amen.
Thank you so much for those meaningful words. My name is Danny Mervis. I am the co-vice president of the RCV. And on behalf of the RCV, the RCNSW, the RAA, the 1,000 participants who have joined us on Zoom tonight, and the many more watching on Facebook Live, I would like to thank you, Abba, for enhancing our event this evening with your presence, with your Torah, and with your personal reflections. Our next speaker this evening is uniquely qualified to share insights and reflections with us. Lord Jonathan Kestenbaum is the Chief Operating Officer of RIT Capital Partners PLC. He is one of the most prominent members of Anglo Jewry and has held numerous key positions inside and outside the Jewish community. Of particular relevance for us tonight, Lord Kestenbaum was the first chief executive of the Office of Chief Rabbi Sachs when he assumed the position in September 1991. Lord Kestenbaum, I know that you and Lady Deborah have shared a special relationship with Rabbi Lord and Lady Elaine Sachs over many years. So at this time, when you are no doubt feeling the great loss of a global leader on a very personal level, I would like to thank you for joining us for this evening's event, and I am honored to invite you to pay tribute to the life and legacy of Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs Zatzal. Lord Jonathan Kestenbaum.
Thank you, Rabbi Mervis. Morenu Harav Rashi, Chief Rabbi, Rabbonim, ladies and gentlemen. Today, we mourn the unimaginable loss and pay tribute to the impact of a man whose passing has produced an unprecedented outpouring of grief. So to be asked to speak of Rabbi Sachs in this setting, in the presence of Chief Rabbi Mervis, is a precious and singular honor. I thank you all, and in particular, I thank you, Rabbi Danny Mervis. Before I begin, let me just say something to our Chief Rabbi. It was Rabbi Sachs who taught us that words matter. It was Rabbi Sachs who taught us that the right words in the right time could enhance, could inspire, could heal. And so to you, Chief Rabbi Mervis, allow me to say that your words this week of tribute, of grief, and of comfort have reverberated around the world, and for that we thank you. You know, there will be many who will speak today and on the days to come of Rabbi Sachs as an intellectual giant, and rightly so. There will be many who will speak of his unparalleled scholarship, and rightly so, and many will speak of his soaring oratory, and rightly so. But as Rabbi Danny Mervis said, my own interactions with Rabbi Sachs were forged as young men and followed with the ebbs and flows of Rabbi Sachs's own transformation, as he has been described today, a prince of our nation. So let me explain. With a strange symmetry, It was 30 years ago this week, November 17th, 1990, that Rabbi Sachs and I met for the first time. It was fittingly in the holy city of Jerusalem. He had just been elected chief rabbi, and he was looking for someone to run his office. We were introduced. We started to talk. We didn't stop talking. And 5 hours after the talks began, he said, "Good. So when do you begin?" And so it began. We worked initially together for 5 years, every hour of every day. But it's no exaggeration to say that since that day in Jerusalem, I was blessed to speak with him almost every week without fail for the past 30 years. We spoke of big things and of small things, although on reflection, not often small things, for as some of you know, Rabbi Sachs was not a man for whom small talk came easily, but big things, real things, things that mattered. They were his métier. That's when he came to life. So allow me, if I may, to use my time to reflect on Rabbi Sachs, the man that I came to know, the man who became my mentor, my teacher, and my cherished friend. And it occurred to me as that I look back on the intensity of those 30 years, there were probably two overriding attributes that characterized Rabbi Sachs that I knew, this most extraordinary man. The first was a restless determination in the face of everything. And I'll explain what I mean. Rabbi Sachs wrote powerfully about all the biblical characters in his remarkable Covenant and Conversation. I'm sure a piece of literature that adorns almost every Friday night table of most of the 1,200 people watching tonight. But perhaps his powers of expression were never more poignant than when he was writing of his own biblical namesake. As has been said earlier, Rabbi Sachs's own Hebrew name was Yaakov. And in particular, I refer you to Rabbi Sachs's Perush on Vayishlach, the beauty in which he writes of Jacob's wrestling with the angel. And I observed that it was this restlessness, this wrestling, that first became Rabbi Sachs's hallmark in those early years. He never stopped demanding more of himself. It often took him many years for ideas to crystallize, countless drafts, numerous revisions, any numbers of crossings out. I learned that he was relentless, remorseless, a perfectionist demanding of himself, but in so doing, he raised the horizons and he raised the aspirations of all of us. By demanding so much of himself in those years, he did the same for our schools, our synagogues, our organizations, and increasingly, he did the same. He raised the horizons of every community in the world, from Memphis to Melbourne, from Stockholm to Sydney. You know, as Chief Rabbi Mervis might testify, the office of the Chief Rabbi is not always plain sailing. It's not an easy role. We sometimes reflect on the fact that the piece of fruit most associated with the office of the Chief Rabbi is a banana, or more particularly, a banana skin. It's surrounded by them. But despite this, Rabbi Sachs never lost his energy. He never lost his optimism, his hope, his zest for life. He once wrote that he carried President Roosevelt's "man in the arena" oration in his diary. You remember the oration. It spoke of those who strive, who often prevail, yes, sometimes who fall short, but who never, ever stop. And Rabbi Sachs never, ever stopped. No matter the tribulations, the challenges to his physical health, the communal strife, he always demanded more of himself, more of us. And in so doing, he became truly a transcendent figure, that figure we mourn today. If I can share the second of those two attributes that I observed over those years, it's this. Amidst the millions of followers, literally millions around the world, who connected with Rabbi Sacks via his books, his Divrei Torah, his videos, his breathtaking public addresses, there remained a most unusual paradox. You see, even though he became a global and colossal figure, an unparalleled figure, he nonetheless retained the ability to speak personally to everyone who followed him. You see, I'm sure you agree that when you read his words, watch his films, listen to his sermons, this was never a remote rabbinical figure speaking of remote issues. It always felt like he was talking to all of us, personally and individually. The numbers of people this week in their tributes who wrote, when Rabbi Sacks spoke, when he said something, when he wrote something, I always knew that somehow he was speaking to me and to me, my family. And I think that explains the unprecedented outpouring of global grief. For not only have we lost the giant of this and many generations, but we lost a figure who personally touched our lives, who reached into our families, who entered into our homes and made them better places. And I use that word again. In that way, he became a transcendent figure. You know, I'm sure the Chief Rabbi would agree that often public discourse cannot always be lofty. It's sometimes petty. It sometimes has its outrage. Rabbi Sacks transcended that. As Chief Rabbi Mervis does as well, Rabbi Sacks asked us to rise above that. And in so doing, Rabbi Sacks spoke to what Abraham Lincoln would have called the better angels of our nature. Ladies and gentlemen, the tributes this week spoke of a giant of a man. But Rabbi Sacks' true greatness is that he showed us who we can be. He demanded it of us. He spoke to us profoundly and personally. He became a man who never stopped encouraging us to be the people we can be. As Rabbi Sacks himself put it, to be the person God wants us to be. And so ours is the generation who were privileged and who were blessed to live in the time of this majestic and towering figure. Teacher, scholar, philosopher, rabbi, Lord, but ultimately a man who inspired our lives and showed us what the world could be. There is no better way to honor Rabbi Sacks than to follow his teachings, to get into the arena, and to have the impact that he wanted us to have. A prince of our nation has gone, yet his teachings will endure. May God bless the memory of Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lord Jonathan Kassavam. It's a true honor and a privilege to have heard you share your personal insights about your relationship and friendship and connection to Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks. And we appreciate you taking the time and coming here and uniting with the Australian community. You know, we were told, Hine matov v'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. How beautiful and how special it is when we are united as one. And tonight, the Australian rabbinate have come together with the Australian community, with the Rebbitzins and the rabbis, united as one to share the pearls of wisdom and the teachings of Rabbi Jonathan Sacks. So please sit back as we watch a small video with a message from each of the rabbis based on the lessons of Rabbi Sacks. We learned from Rabbi Sacks, never try to be clever.
Always try to be wise.
Respect others, even if they disrespect you. Never seek publicity for what you do.
If you deserve it, you will receive it.
If you don't, you will be attacked. In any case, goodness never needs to draw attention to itself.
When you do good to others, it is yourself, your conscience, and your self-respect that will be the beneficiary.
The greatest gift of giving is the opportunity to give.
Keep your distance from those that seek honor.
Life never takes shortcuts.
There is no success without effort, no achievements without hard work.
In everything you do, be mindful that God sees all we do. There is no cheating God.
When one tries to deceive others, usually the only one they end up deceiving is themselves.
Be very slow indeed to judge others. If they are wrong, God will judge them. If we are wrong, God will judge us.
Greater by far than the love we receive
is the love we give.
It was once said of a great religious leader that he was a man that took God so seriously that he never felt the need to take himself seriously at all. And that is something worth aspiring to.
Use your time well. Life is short. Too short to waste on television, computer games, and unnecessary emails.
Too short to waste on idle gossip or envying others for what they have.
Too short for anger and indignation. Too short to waste on criticizing others.
Teach us to number our days, says the psalm, that we may get a heart of wisdom.
But any day on which you have done some good to someone has not been wasted.
You will find much in life to distress you. People can be careless, cruel, thoughtless, offensive, arrogant, harsh, destructive, insensitive, and rude. But that is their problem, not yours. Your problem is how to respond.
No one, a wise lady once said, can make you feel inferior without your own permission. The same applies for other negative emotions.
Don't react. Don't respond. Don't get angry. Or if you do, pause for as long as it takes for the anger to dissipate and carry on with the rest of life.
Don't hand others a victory over your own emotional state.
Forgive, or if you can't forgive, just ignore.
If you've tried and failed,
don't feel bad.
God forgives our failures as soon as we acknowledge our failures, and that spares us from the self-deception of trying to see them as success.
No one worth admiring ever succeeded without many failures on the way.
If you lack the courage to fail,
then you lack the courage to succeed.
Always seek out the friendship of those who are strong where you are weak.
The work of a team, a partnership, a collaboration with others who have different gifts or different ways of looking at things is always greater than any one individual can achieve alone.
Create moments of silence in your soul so that you can hear the voice of God.
If something is wrong, don't blame others.
Ask, how can I help to put it right?
Always remember that you
create the atmosphere that surrounds you.
If you want others to smile, you must smile.
If you want others to give, you must give.
If you want others to respect you, you must show your respect for them.
How the world treats us
is a mirror of how we treat the world.
Be patient. Sometimes the world is slower than you are.
The journey from is always easier than the journey to.
Never worry when people say you are being too idealistic.
It's only an idealist who can change the world. And do you want to, in the course of your life, leave the world unchanged?
Be straight, be honest, and always do what you say you're going to do.
There really is no other way to live.
Thank Thank you so much. I would like to take this opportunity and acknowledging Zalmi Glasner and Rabbi Mendy Eisenschmidt, who have put so much effort behind the scenes and making sure that tonight runs smoothly. And tonight, as you can see, we have 1,000 on Zoom, and plus it's live streaming on Facebook and other platforms and slowing down the video. Our next guest speaker is no stranger to any one of us. Mr. Josh Frydenberg, our federal treasurer and dear friend. When I reached out to him to speak tonight, his response was instantaneous. It would be my honor. Rabbi Sachs, he told me, has been a mentor for him, a teacher, and many a time he would hear our dear treasurer quote Rabbi Sachs in numerous speeches. Unfortunately, our treasurer is working tonight and is actually on a flight, and has so kindly only a few hours ago recorded a special message to share here tonight. Rabbi Mendy, let's please welcome Mr. Josh Frydenberg.
What does one say about the passing of a sage in our time? A man who earned the respect and admiration of millions. A life that was full of understanding, compassion, prayer and belief. And a legacy that will live on through the ages. Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs was that very man. As Chief Rabbi of the United Hebrew Congregations of the Commonwealth, he provided leadership and direction to the Jewish community while building a bridge to those in the non-Jewish community. His message was universal. Love, not hate. Tolerance, not ignorance. Hope, not despair. It was a message that he carried through his many speeches and writings from the beginning to the end. Morality, Restoring the Common Good in Divided Times was the title of his most recent book, in which he argued the need to urgently move away from the hyper-individualistic society that we live in today to one where we build into our culture a greater concern for the welfare of others. Our focus as a society on the twin institutions of the market and the state needed, Rabbi Sachs said, to be complemented with a shared sense of moral commitment, built on cooperation, not competition, common good, not self-interest, and a shared sense of collective responsibility. This, Rabbi Sachs believed, was essential to a good society. Such conviction and clarity of thought is all too rare in public life, which helps explain why the wisdom of Rabbi Sachs was so important and will be so deeply missed. As Cardinal Vincent Nichols, Archbishop of Westminster, said, "I express my sorrow to the worldwide Jewish community on the loss of this great figure. I have lost a friend, the Jewish community a great leader, humanity an eloquent spokesman." And as our Prime Minister Scott Morrison said, Rabbi Sachs's inspirational teachings and wisdom have long transcended the faith divide and been an important voice for peace, hope and understanding. Indeed, Prime Minister Morrison wrote to Rabbi Sachs only days before his death, saying how he relied on the words of the Rabbi in many of his own speeches, on topics ranging from tribalism and terrorism to the Middle East and the pandemic. As he said, Rabbi Sachs grasped the wisdom that liberal democracies need. To the family of Rabbi Sachs, Lady Elaine and her children Joshua, Dina and Gilla, I join with so many others from around the world in wishing you a long life and thanking through you your late husband and father for his service to the Jewish community and society at large. Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs was a giant, a truly special person. May his memory be a blessing. Zikrona Livracha. May he rest in peace.
Good evening. My name is Rabbi Nachum Shapiro. I'm privileged to represent the Rabbinate of Sydney and New South Wales as the president of the Rabbinical Council of New South Wales. Tonight we heard how Rabbi Sachs especially impacted the Jewish world as a chief rabbi and through the many teachings and books that he wrote. We also heard, just from our treasurer, Josh Frydenberg, thank you so much. We've heard from him how Rabbi Sachs even affected the wider world, being a true Er La'amim, a true light unto the nations, one who affected, impacted so many people throughout the world. And we heard Rabbi Mervis mention the fact that Rabbi Sachs also was a unique family man. We've heard from those who helped him as a chief rabbi, from the chief rabbi, the present chief rabbi, Rabbi Mervis, as well as one who interacts with our prime minister, the treasurer, in seeing the impact of Rabbi Sachs upon the broader world. But now we are privileged to be able to hear from family. So as Avraham Avinu affected the entire world, because he was Av HaMon Goyim, as his name suggests, a father of all the peoples. But with that, on the Shabbos that Rabbi Sachs passed away, we read how Avram also was told by God to look after his own family, to look after Yitzchak. And so we are privileged to hear from his niece, Miriam Sachs Kushitsky, who has given us a message that we will be playing for you now. She wanted to be able to be here with us tonight, but she living in Toronto now, it is 4 a.m., and she sent us a message. And we are privileged to hear that as we mourn not only for the loss of a great man for the people, Jewish people, for the world, but also a very special family man.
Dozens of words have already been written and spoken about Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, rabbi, teacher, philosopher, spokesman for the Jewish people. I want to talk about Rabbi Sachs from another point of view, as my uncle. When we were young, growing up in Jerusalem, my brothers and I used to call my uncle the Chief Rabbit. He loved it. When my uncle met any of us, after a long delay, it was always with a huge hello. Miriam, how are you? He really wanted to know, what are you doing? What is happening? He wanted to find out all about what we were doing to point you in directions you may not have thought about, giving you names you never heard of to look up. My brother Dan was studying to be a psychologist. One Shabbat evening, he walked with my uncle back to his hotel, telling him he's studying psychology and was particularly interested in CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. Ah, said my uncle, Aaron Beck, such a sweet man. They spoke on the subject for 20 minutes. At the end of the conversation, Dan asked my father, how come Uncle Jonathan knows so much about the subject? Uncle Jonathan knew everything. My uncle never spoke down to us. As the Times of London wrote, he always made you feel clever. My uncle wanted to learn from us. He loved technology and wanted to know how he could use it to reach new audiences. My uncle wanted to learn about the latest Israeli music. Music was very important to my uncle. He would discuss Beethoven and Eminem with the same intensity. He was mesmerized by the musical Hamilton. Makor Rishon, an Israeli weekend newspaper, has a magazine section. Each week in the back cover, a public personality is asked about cultural influences and childhood memories. One of the standard questions is, with whom would you like to spend a day? The answers are usually Maimonides, Herzl, Ben Gurion, Begin, Rabin. My uncle replied, Lin-Manuel Miranda. My uncle was obsessed with how Hamilton takes a piece of United States history, which may be outdated and irrelevant to many of younger generation in America, and makes it so contemporary, so relevant to people of so many backgrounds. That is what my uncle wanted to achieve in his Jewish teaching. There is not a film my uncle did not know about, a book he had not read, and he looked at them all through a Jewish teaching lens. My uncle loved Israel and the idea of Israel. We all know he spoke in every forum in support of Israel and against anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. He was one of Israel's greatest spokesmen, but he also loved being in Israel. It was where he could take his jacket off and relax. It may not be Banff National Park or Bondi Beach, but as he would say, Aval zeh shelanu, but this is ours. However busy his schedule, my uncle always made time for his family and would do whatever he could to answer our requests. My mother and I have worked for many years for an organization for severely handicapped children called Aleh. On our behalf, he visited Aleh's special homes on numerous occasions, spoke at events, and even came to Toronto to speak on their behalf. At the time of my brother Gad's bar mitzvah, Gad's true love was football, so my uncle went with him to Teddy Stadium, the Jerusalem equivalent of Toronto's Rogers Centre or Melbourne's cricket ground, to play football with him out on the pitch. So while most bar mitzvah boy films may have greetings from family or blessings and well wishes from friends, my brother Gad's film had him taking penalty shots against Chief Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs. My uncle was a warm, emotional, and loving man. He enjoyed nothing better than teaching children or students, learning with them, growing with them. I have wonderful photos of my uncle on the floor with my young children during his last visit to Toronto. Uncle Jonathan never missed an opportunity to give credit to my Aunt Elaine, without whom my uncle would not have made it through life. My uncle never did learn the PIN for his credit card. I learned many lessons from my uncle, simple lessons which I hope will accompany me through life. Love your family with unconditional love. Love people who are different from you, because people who are different make you broader, while people who are just like yourself make you narrower. Give your partner a compliment every day, and so many more lessons which my uncle taught us and which he himself lived by. Rabbi Sachs belonged to the world. He was Prince Charles's rabbi. He was Prime Ministers Tony Blair and David Cameron's rabbi. He was author Amos Oz's rabbi, and he was singer Ishai Rigo's rabbi. And he was rabbi to so many more famous and important people. But for us, he was a dignified leader of our family. During his last illness, my uncle received a number of letters of support. I would like to read to you the last letter that was read out to my uncle by his daughter on Friday afternoon, a few hours before he passed away. Dear Rabbi Sachs, I want to let you know that you are in the prayers of many across the globe. In a time of uncertainty, yours is a clear voice. You might be aware, I rely on your word in many of my speeches. From tribalism and terrorism to Middle East and pandemic, you regularly grasp the wisdom the liberal democracies need. At times, my speechwriters, staff, and colleagues have all pressed your words into my hands, and my words have been better because of them. Please focus on your recovery and renew your strength. Be assured that you and your family will be in my prayers. Yours sincerely, Scott Morrison, Prime Minister of Australia. Rabbi, Lord, Professor, Light unto the Nations, Uncle Jonathan, Yehi Zichro Baruch.
I would like to thank Miriam for that moving contribution. And I understand that when Gila Sachs read that letter from Prime Minister Morrison to Rabbi Lord Sachs last Friday afternoon, he responded with a warm smile, a warmth and a smile that will be missed by us all. Miriam was moved to see the tribute we showed before, bringing together over 50 rabbis and rebbitzins from across Australia to share the teachings of Rabbi Sachs. She has shared that video with the family and is passing on to the Sachs family the condolences of everybody taking part tonight. And to conclude tonight's event, Rabbi Philip Halbron OAM, the president of the RCV, will recite Kel Maleh, the memorial prayer.
את נשמת מורנו הרב יעקב צבי בן אריה שהלך לעולמו בעבור יסתירהו בסתר כנפיו לעולמים ויצרור החיים את נשמתו אדוני הוא נחלתו וינוח בשלום על משכבו
Thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening and for staying on as well. We wish you all a good night.